This video will show you all the upgrades possible on your MacBook Pro 2012 15-inch. Each upgrade will be timestamped in the description with a link to how to perform the modification yourself. A lot of these guides exist for other Macs, but I don't think there's a definitive one for the MacBook Pro 2012. I hope to create that today and list every possible modification and upgrade. Starting off with the display, the default display for this model is a 1440 by 900 glossy panel. This can be upgraded to a 1680 by 1050 glossy or matte option. I'd highly recommend the matte version, as its anti-glare properties are really nice to look at. I'd rank this upgrade 7 out of 10 for usefulness. The microphone and camera cannot be upgraded, but note to replace the display, the camera, microphone and whole top panel assembly with the glowing logo all come off at once. So you're forced to replace all these things at once, even if you only need one part replaced. Next up, RAM. There are 2 RAM slots in which you can place a maximum combined total of 16 GB. The maximum speed is 1600 MHz. Some lower speed RAM does work, but it's best to stick with the 1600. Going from 4 GB or 8 to 16 is definitely worth it, so I'd rate this upgrade maybe an 8 out of 10. Okay, storage. There's no concrete limit to how much storage you can put in these things. Size isn't all that matters though, and replacing your default hard drive that came with the Mac with an SSD will massively increase your speed all round. There are 2 SATA connectors on the motherboard, one for the storage drive and one for the DVD player. As long as you don't need the DVD player, you can remove it and put a second hard drive in its place. This Mac doesn't have the upgrade, but I'd highly recommend it. I like to have a smaller SSD for macOS and a 1TB hard drive for any data I might need to store. I'd rate this upgrade a 9 out of 10. Very useful. Next up, the Airport card. The default Airport card supports Wi-Fi speeds of up to 450 megabits per second and Bluetooth 4.0. Upgrading the Airport card can be done in several different ways, but the easiest is to buy a Retina MacBook card and an adapter, which comes with all the cables and heat shrink you'll need. Once upgraded, you'll have far stronger and better connections, as well as the ability to unlock your Mac with your Apple Watch. Overall, I'd give this a 5 out of 10 for usefulness. If you do own an Apple Watch, it'll be nice to be able to unlock your Mac with it. On the other hand, the speed increases you might not really notice. Operating system. macOS versions from 10.7 Lion to 10.15 Catalina work natively. With the OpenCore Legacy patcher though, it's easy to run macOS versions up to 13.0 Ventura. Windows 7, 8, 10 and 11 can also be run natively. It's possible to create multiple boot partitions, so having Windows 10, macOS Catalina and a patched version of Ventura makes a lot of sense. Once installed, macOS typically takes up about 12 GB of disk space. Windows, however, is often upwards of 30 GB. Best to stick with one Windows installation, I'd say. CPU. The 2012 15-inch was made with 3 different Intel i7 3 series CPU options, each of which are quad-core with 8 threads. The 2.3 GHz is the lowest tier model. Next is the 2.6 GHz. Rarer than these two, but a little bit more powerful and a bigger L3 cache than the rest, is the 2.7 GHz build-to-order model. Generally speaking, the 2.6 and 2.7 GHz ones are the only ones you should consider, as they come with double the graphics memory and offer that bit more power. The CPU can't be removed on its own, so you have to remove the whole motherboard if you want to upgrade it. If you're going from a 2.3 GHz model to a top spec one, I'd say it's worth it, if you can get the motherboard cheaply that is. Otherwise, this is what I'd consider overkill for an 11-year-old computer. Next up, graphics. The 15-inch 2012 has a dedicated GPU called the NVIDIA GT650M, with 512 MB of video memory on the 2.3 GHz versions and a gigabyte on the 2.6 and 2.7s. This is soldered to the motherboard next to the CPU, which means it's practically impossible to upgrade. There are ways to upgrade your graphics performance though. eGPU cases let you run almost any desktop GPU using a couple of cables and a box, like this one. It's very difficult to get these to work with 2012 Macs, but it certainly is possible. Secondly, a company called iBoff has created a genius solution called XGPU, where with some soldering, extra circuit boards are put in the MacBook so that it can run external graphics cards through a PCIe interface. I don't have any experience with this, but I would add that running graphics cards through PCIe is ideal, as it's far faster than using a regular eGPU box. I'd rate these upgrades a 5 on the usefulness scale. It's great to have the extra power if you need it, but running an external GPU does add a lot of size to your setup, not to mention it's pretty expensive. Cooling and thermal modifications. The fans on this Mac cannot be upgraded, without custom-made parts that is. Very cheap thermal pads can be added to the heatsink of these fans though, pushing more heat through the case, which then acts as a radiator of sorts. This does make the bottom of the laptop harder to touch at most times, so it's a situation of sacrifice, really. Another possibility to help with cooling is to drill holes in the bottom case at just the right places so as to improve airflow. Even my cat can tell this looks absolutely ridiculous, I know. It does help though. My temperatures went down upwards of 5 degrees on average after doing this. Overall, I saw single-digit increases in temperature using these mods, so I'd rate them a 6 out of 10 for usefulness. Battery and power supply. Replacing the battery on this laptop is something you'll almost certainly need to do now that it'll be up to a decade old. They're broadly good for between 800 and 1000 cycles. As far as I know, no one has managed to upgrade the battery in these, so you're stuck with somewhat mediocre battery life at the best of times. Make sure you're always charging your 15-inch with an 85-watt MagSafe 1 charger, as lower power chargers are not made for this model and can overheat. You can double the length of the charging cable by using the normally included extension cable. Depending on the state of your current battery, I'd rate this upgrade a 7 out of 10 on the usefulness scale. Optical Drive. If you don't want to use your optical drive bay for a second storage drive, you can keep the disc reader or upgrade it to support Blu-ray. I'm not one for physical media really, but if you're big on Blu-ray or have a lot of discs, this could obviously help a lot. Word of caution though, these laptops get pretty loud when reading discs. The usefulness of this upgrade is up to you really, but I'd prefer to have a second hard drive instead of an optical drive. I've tried my best to research and include every upgrade here. If there's others you guys can think of, I'd really like to hear about them in a comment below. As I mentioned, all links to upgrade guides should be in the description below. I'm a massive fan of this computer in particular. I've had probably half a dozen of these over the years, partly from when I used to sell MacBooks as a side job. I use a MacBook Pro 2012 every single day for work and for making these videos, so I love to see upgrades still being done on them. Thanks a lot for watching, all of you, and I'll see you at the same time next week. Psst, subscribe for more.